It's such a nice morning when we are remembering all the great elements that make us a freedom fighter. Remember on a high note. On that note, let me talk to you about one topic today. Stories are beautiful to listen, but what about those unsung heroes? We have many unsung heroes everywhere across India, but have you ever given a thought about an unsung heroine? Yes, you heard it right. An unsung heroine. There are females, there are ladies, there are girls, there are women who sacrifice their life for our motherland. Amongst them, today, I'm going to introduce you to one such personality who will make you think about the sacrifice on a different note in a different way. Before I reveal the name to you, I have a few one liners to tell you so that you can imagine or even try to tell me who this person is. Let me start with the first line. My life is for my country. This revolutionary freedom fighter is from Bengal, East Bengal, that is today's Bangladesh. She is also called as the Iron Lady of India. She is also called as ideal for many women. But it was only in 2012, 112 years after she was born, that she received her graduate in philosophy posthumously after her death in 1932. Her life story has also been converted into a popular Bollywood movie, Khel Hum Ji Jaan Se, and another movie also called as Chittagong. If you were able to guess her name, then it is, or if you were not, then her name is Pritilata Waddedar. Pritilata Waddedar is also called very fondly as Rani. Let me introduce to you who is this Pritilata Waddedar. During India's freedom struggle, there were many freedom fighters who were fighting for the independence for India. And India, as we know it today, is not the India that existed then in 1900s, early 1900s, in 1930s particularly. India of 1930s included the West and East Pakistan, the west part and the east part of India now are known with different names, and the west part is now renamed as Bangladesh, which was also called as East Bengal. In this part of India, there is a small town, Chittagong, and in Chittagong was born a lady, a small girl, the second in the family of the Vaidya family in Chittagong on the 5th of May 1911. Preeti Lata is the second born to her parents, Mr. Shri Jagabandhu Waddedar, her father, who was a clerk at Chittagong. Her mother, Pratibhamayi Devi, was a homemaker. Preeti Lata was the fond child of the parents, second born to the family. Preeti Lata Waddedar was a meritorious student right from her school days. Her father, though was a clerk in the Chittagong government, he sent his children to the best possible schools to give the best possible education. Preeti Lata also received the best possible educations during her time. She attended Dr. Kastagir Girls' School, where she always stood first. She was extremely meritorious and brilliant. She always stood the first in her class, in fact, in her school. After her schooling, Pritilata went to Eden College in Dhaka, and she stood first, this time not for her school, not only for her class and school, but for the entire district. She stood first in her intermediate. After finishing her intermediate to pursue her higher education, she was then joined to Bethany College of Kolkata, today's Calcutta, where she completed her graduation in philosophy. But it was very unfortunate that her graduation certificate was withheld by the then East India Company. She received her graduate certificate in 2012 after nearly 80 years after her death in 1932. Well, why did she die? Why did Pritilata die? What happened to her? And why was her graduation certificate withheld? Here is the story. Pritilata Waddedar is fondly called as Rani. Pritilata Waddedar was inspired by a great degree by Jhansi Rani Lakshmi Bai. We all have heard Jhansi Rani Lakshmi Bai and her struggle to get India's independence and her sacrifice in sacrificing her life for the independence of India. And this narration of Jhansi Rani Lakshmi Bai was given to Pritilata Waddedar along with her friend Kalpana Datta when they were in school by their teacher Usha Devi. The teacher spoke about Jhansi Rani Lakshmi Bai so many times to the girls in the school that the girls started to imbibe Jhansi in their blood, in their consciousness. All that they could think about was to live like Jhansi Rani Lakshmi Bai every moment and struggle for India's independence. During this time, Preeti Lata Waddedar was so motivated that after she finished her intermediate, she said, God has given me enough intelligence and I'm doing very well, but now I want to think about my country. My country comes first before my life. And with this very strong motivation, she started to involve herself into many social activities. While she was involving herself into many social activities, she was also the teacher, the headmaster of a school, of an English medium school, Nandan Kannan Aparna Charan English School in Chittagong. When she became the headmistress, all that she was doing was she was conveying the message of freedom fighting along with academics to all those girls in the school. Ushadi, who cultivated or who made her think about Jhansi Rani Lakshmi Bai, was instrumental for Preeti Lata to take up the profession of being a teacher and yet be a freedom fighter. Kalpana Datta, her very, very close friend and aide in the freedom struggle, has written in her biography that they did not know what they wanted to do or what they wanted to become when they grew up while they were in school. But they started to imbibe Jhansi Rani Lakshmi Bai into their whole body, into their consciousness, into their mind, that they thought they are fearless. They are fearless and they are the Rani of their Chittagong. During these days, in the 1930s, when women were not given equal rights, when women were not very much welcomed into the freedom struggle, Preeti Lata Waddedar made up her mind and said, now my life shall be for my country. She joined Sri Sangha, which is also called as Dipali Sangha, and she became a part of the Dipali Sangha, which was working towards the freedom struggle in 1930s. After that, in around 1930, the year 1930, she meets one revolutionary of Bangladesh, then India, called Surya Sen and Nirmal Sen. Surya Sen was a revolutionary. He too was a teacher. He was fondly called as Master Da. Pritilata Waddedar met Surya Sen at Dhalgat camp, and she said, I want to join the revolutionaries. I don't want to be a moderate. I don't want to be someone who would sit there at home, take my life ahead, and just become a normal householder. I want to serve my motherland. I want to fight for the freedom of my motherland. And she did all this. She said all this only at a very young age of 21. Today, we have so many college students and school students amongst us, and so many other viewers. Let's just go back to our life when we were 21, when we were 18. It's very hard to take such a strong step, but Pritilata Waddedar took this step and she lived by it word to word. In the year 1930, she joined Surya Sen's revolutionary army, and they called in all the youngsters across Chittagong to declare a day as Chittagong Revolutionary Day, the uprising of Chittagong for the freedom of India. On a given date, many raids were planned, and the group was divided into small parts. And Pritilata Waddedar was part of one group which raided the police army, the police camp, also the telephone and telegraph offices. They even captured the reserve police line, which was very, very difficult in those days. All that they had was few weapons. And Pritilata Waddedar took herself to the extreme of telling that she would gain some kind of training in armory without any kind of hesitation or even any kind of fear in her. She was ready to use the armory even in adverse situations. Pritilata Waddedar was also transporting weapons in situations where she was feared if by anybody else to be caught. But during certain situations, Pritilata Waddedar was given the responsibility, entrusted with the responsibility to transport weapons. And this was done because in those days, women were not seen as suspicious people. And taking aid of this situation, Surya Sen gave her the responsibility many times to transport weapons. On 1932, in 1932, there was a situation which was alarming, and it was not only in Chittagong, in many parts of India. Today, we go to many clubs, to many restaurants where we are equally invited inside as anybody else. But can you imagine, even in your wildest imagination, where a board invites you and you are not allowed to go inside because of what reads on the board? One such board was put in front of the club, the European club in Chittagong, and it read, Dogs and Indians not allowed. Dogs and Indians not allowed. Indians were deemed equal to dogs, and Indians were demeaned to such an extent that they did not even deserve an entry. Pritilata and her entire team were against this. Surya Sen had planned to teach these European club members who were Britishers a lesson. They wanted to do away with this board, but it was not that easy. In 1932, this European club called the Prahartali European Club was to be now engulfed by the revolutionaries, and Pritilata Waddedar had to lead this group. But this time, Pritilata Waddedar was alone. Her friend Kalpana Datta was arrested a week ago, and Pritilata Waddedar was entrusted with the responsibility and the leadership to lead this riot. Pritilata Waddedar and few other members of the Surya Sen revolutionary group, Kranti Amar Rahe, Kranti Amar Rahe, Kranti Amar Rahe, uttered these words and gathered enough armories, and they raided the European club. At around 10:45 p.m. night, when it was dark in 1932, Pritilata Waddedar and all her group of revolutionaries come to this European club in the night, and they surround the Europeans who were partying that night. Many families of European Britishes and the East India Company, British men, officers, and their families were there. Pritilata Waddedar and her group raids, and there will be exchange of bullets. Pritilata Waddedar, after their initial exchange of armories and bullets and fight, they were able to pull down a few of the English members, English soldiers, and even the wives of these Englishmen. But Pritilata Waddedar was also the leader to the group, and she thought, as a leader, you need to lead. And with this, Pritilata Waddedar made sure that her entire team is safe, and she got the entire team out of the European club, and she herself was the last to move out while she was engaged in this small firing within the European club. She succumbed to a wound. Pritilata Waddedar came out of the European club. She looked at her wound and she said to herself, I shall not be captured alive by these Europeans. I am going to sacrifice my life for my motherland, but never to be captured by these Europeans. And for these situations, Surya Sen had given a very small, like a tablet capsule of cyanide, which most of these revolutionaries carried with them. And when such a situation would arise where they would be in a position of being captured by the Englishmen, the revolutionaries were told to take this capsule and does not be held or captured by the Britishers. Pritilata Waddedar, after she came out of this European club, she proved that this time in India, Indians will be definitely allowed, be it a male, woman, or anyone. As she stood there and made her team to go into safety, Pritilata Waddedar, with her wound, feared to be captured, and she consumed the cyanide capsule. As she consumed the cyanide capsule, there were just two sentences on her lips. Vande Mataram, Vande Mataram, Kranti Amar Rahe. As she said this, the cyanide took her life and she became a martyr. She passed away moments after she took the cyanide capsule. She fell right in front of the European club, and the bird of her life was gone forever. In the morning, they discovered Pritilata's body, and when Pritilata's body was examined, they did see that Pritilata had succumbed to a wound, but the wound was not very serious. She could have lived with that wound, but Pritilata Waddedar did not want to be captured, and hence she took her life with this. women of the 1930s gathered so much of courage. If one Pritilata can take a step towards the freedom struggle, so can we. This started a brigade of women who then came into the various parties, the various freedom struggle group to be part of the freedom struggle. And thus, the dream of these revolutionaries and freedom fighters did come to see a moment of celebration in 1947. But remembering Preeti Lata, she is today fondly remembered as the beacon of light for women. Preeti Lata Waddedar is not only remembered for her freedom struggle, but in her name there are many halls, many schools, and even a road that is named as Preeti Lata Waddedar. Preeti Lata Waddedar bust is also established on the Pahartali Railway School, which is adjacent to Pahartali European Club, which now no longer bears who can be entered inside. On the day when Pritilata Waddedar passed away in 1932, so did the board see its vanishing forever. Pritilata Waddedar is a testimony for all us, especially women, to know that freedom fighters need not just be men. Freedom fighters can be girls, women, ladies, and women have the same josh of freedom fighting so as anyone else. We have the same to move towards the freedom. If in case there is a moment that we can think of where women were not being allowed to be part of the freedom struggle, probably the freedom struggle wouldn't have taken that kind of a supremacy. Women's role in the freedom struggle is equally remembered today. And in one such incident, the BBC ran a series remembering women. It was called The Snatches, Moments from Women's Lives. And in this, Preeti Lata short film was part of the BBC series. If BBC can identify Preeti Lata, let us just imagine and think about what kind of an impact Preeti Lata left on the young minds and the minds of women in 1930s. If we are so moved by Preeti Lata's sacrifice just at a tender young age of 21, how much more should we love our country? How much more should we live for our country? It's been more than 100 years, and it's been about 80 years since Preeti Lata sacrificed her life and became a martyr. But Preeti Lata lives with us even today. There is Preeti Lata Waddedar Mahavidyalaya, Preeti Lata Waddedar Primary School, Preeti Lata girls hostel, boys girls section of many schools in Chittagong, and Pritilata Hall of Residence in National Institute of Technology, West Bengal. Pritilata Waddedar has not been forgotten. There are days which are celebrated to mark her Jayanti, to mark when Pritilata Waddedar was lost her life as a martyr. And these are the days that will bring in or make us remember the freedom fighting struggle that our ancestors were part of. Preeti Lata Waddedar's entire life has been converted into popular Bollywood movies. Khel Hum Ji Jaan Se in 2010, and also another movie in 2012 titled Chittagong. This was a very brief introduction to Preeti Lata Waddedar. But beyond all of this, let us remember Preeti Lata Waddedar as one person who became the reason for many girls and many women to take part in the Indian freedom struggle and thus give us the freedom and independence that we are enjoying today. A big salute to Preeti Lata Waddedar, no longer an unsung hero, but a celebrated heroine of the freedom struggle. Jai Hind, Bharat Mata ki Jai, Vande Mataram. Thank you.
ಧನ್ಯವಾದಗಳು ಮೇಡಮ್.